Philadelphia has a really intense beer culture from the people that settled here. Beer has always been part of their lives.
Philadelphia is the only city that has a neighborhood called Brewery Town, and yet that doesn't even do the city justice, because you can hardly find a neighborhood that didn't have a brewery when breweries were at their peak.
Among the first things that Penn did when he settled here was build a brewery. Beer at that point was a food substance more than anything. The water wasn't particularly clean, so we were drinking a beer instead of, fresh water.
Most housewives were probably making home brew at home. This would be something that would be served at every meal and include all members of the family.
In 1683, William Frampton built the first brewery in Philadelphia. By 1793, Dock Street was the largest beer-producing seaport in the United States.
Philadelphia had a half a dozen breweries right along Dock Creek and Walnut Street there. They were serving the ship captains for ships' voyages, and they were serving the multitude of taverns that the city had.
Around the time of the Revolution, beer starts to take off. Ale, English-style ale. We were seeing British-trained brewers coming over to Philadelphia and opening up professional breweries in this city, and they were starting to grow and supply the beer to the taverns. So that about the time the Declaration is being written and the Constitution, it's being written and argued over in Philadelphia's taverns, and they're drinking Philadelphia-made beer.
This was the time of the Industrial Revolution. If there was any way to be more efficient and use your materials better to make a better product, they were on it. As those developments occurred, then we had brewers making 20,000 barrels of beer.
As Philadelphia grows, we start seeing immigrants come to the city. In 1840, a German immigrant comes here named John Wagner, and he brings with him German yeast to make lager-style beer, a whole new type of beer.
Lager beer had attained a status as being a national beverage. Philadelphia already had a deep brewing tradition as a port city, and these large lager beer breweries that developed in the city were delivering beer around the country and around the world. Less than a mile from where the first lager was brewed in America in 1840, we had the world's first porter being brewed in America in Northern Liberties. Around 1885, there were close to 100 breweries here.
We have these growth of these large breweries across America, but at the same time, we see the growth of temperance in America. Prohibition was in the 1920s, and it ended in 1933. Initially, nobody really thought it was going to involve beer, because beer was always regarded as a drink of moderation. It was something even kids were drinking back in the day. But eventually, we outlawed its sale in America with the 18th Amendment.
A lot of brewers did not take the law very seriously. The federal agencies stepped up their efforts, and they had pretty much shut off the flow of beer coming from Philadelphia.
The smaller breweries of Philadelphia eventually went down until the 1980s, when all we had left in Philadelphia was Ortlieb's and Schmidt's.
In 1987, the last of the brewers that came back after Prohibition, the Schmidt's Brewery, went out of business. And it was the first time since William Penn's day that there were no breweries in the city. And about a year after the closing of Schmidt's, David Mink opened the Samuel Adams Brew House. His kettle was half the size of that of William Frampton, and yet brewing had returned to a city that had this rich brewing tradition. About a year after that, the Dock Street Brewery opened at 18th and Cherry Street. They brewed styles of beer that people in the city had never heard of.
Today, we make a beer that's called Man Full of Trouble Porter, and it's named after a tavern that is still standing on 2nd Street near Dock Street.
Today, we have 2 production breweries in the city, Yards and Philadelphia Brewing Company, and we have a half a dozen brew pubs.
It just kept growing. There was more taps happening, there was more craft beer being sold. And I would say almost every neighborhood has a craft beer bar.
Philadelphia was really the birthplace of brewing in the United States. It was really Philadelphia got the industry growing because we were a shipping city. We were a city where industry was taken very seriously. We were staging a comeback as a brewing city, and most of all, as a city where the people are known for appreciating their beer.